Yeah, I thought that last meeting was going to be quick. Wow.
I didn't.
On Mike, you should know better than that.
Well, no,
We are
I
now live.
mean,
You
as
can
soon as I
begin
think it's
speaking
going
at
to be
any
quick,
time.
I should realize it's not going to be.
Jackie, we had our official plan meeting, public meeting last night too.
Yeah, how did that go?
Four people.
We had 2 people show up.
So meanwhile, we had to pay Evolution.
Sorry,
Oh,
everyone, to interrupt. We are now live, so you can begin the meeting.
Thank you very much. I will call this meeting to order. And I'll remind everyone to please disclose of any pecuniary interests that they may have at the appropriate time. We already dealt with the medical officer of health update, so we're going to go right to number 4, which is long-term care division. And we have 3 information reports
Oh, I muted it. That's why.
there. Can we get a motion to receive and file those reports? Moved by Councillor Arnold, seconded by Councillor Hand. Any questions or comments on any of those reports? I see a few. So we're going to start with Councillor Stark and then go to Councillor Cook.
Yes, I believe that the motion encompasses the report, page 6 for Dementia House. Am I correct? Yes. So I think this is a very, very exciting proposal. And I speak from some family experience. My father-in-law was a day user of dementia facilities in Petrolia, and he benefited immensely from that. Not only he, but my mother-in-law, who needed respite. So when I hear that this opportunity is being taken to the next level, this report is magnificent in its scope. So I wanted to question whether or not, and Mary, maybe Mr. Pacheco can help me or illuminate what my concern is. Are we looking at the various options? And I believe there were 3 different options at the end of the report that identified 3 different dollar values. Are we looking at referring this report to budget? Because in scenario number 3, I believe it was a $4 million ask. And quite frankly, and I believe that dealt with 10 residents in terms of what would be required to get to the ability to house 10 residents. Beyond that scope of 10 people, my question was, is it possible to look at building a shell? And again, I don't know what we have in terms of ability to build out there, but is it possible to build a shell that would allow a future development within the same scope for another 10 residents? So we would build 10 residents now, or at least budget for it, but also allow for expansion for another 10 residents. This issue of dementia is not getting smaller, it's exponentially getting larger. And with that, I think we need to look to the future as to where we're going. And I think, quite frankly, I think this is the direction we should be going. I can't thank staff enough for this particular initiative. This is dramatically important. And then the second part of the question would be, where is the province in terms of funding this kind of a development going forward?
Thank you, Councillor Stark. I'm happy for your enthusiasm. So this is really a conceptual report. We still have some work to do. I do want to say that the numbers in the report have a lot of contingencies. So I'm hopeful it won't be quite that much, but we do have 30 acres at Lambton Meadowview Villa. So we do have room if in the future we wanted to expand the dementia house into several, and there are some, think in the presentation some information about some areas and jurisdictions where they have done this. There's not a lot in Ontario. There have been some Eden alternative greenhouse models done in retirement homes, but it's still early. And part of the work that we still need to do, and I will be bringing another report to the October committee, is around how we might get this funded, what the operational costs would be, what kind of staffing changes we would have to make. This does change the way we staff significantly, because there's a multitasked worker that would work as opposed to PSW, dietary aid. So it's a different way of doing things. So we still have some work to do on that. We haven't looked at building a shell, but we do have a 125 bed home that's 27 years old. So in the not too distant future, we have to think about how we're going to do that as well. I suspect that the ministry is more concerned about the homes in the province right now that are more than 30 years old. So I'm not sure how the funding will work. Normally what happens when we build a new home is we get some money up front, and that has been increased with the construction subsidy. And then so much per bed per month, and we would pay a mortgage with that. So we still have some work to do about how we would fund this and how the operational funding would work as well. I hope that answers your question.
It goes towards answering the question, and I can see now that future discussion is where this whole topic is going. And my final question in this regard is, I know it's a very emotional decision when a family has to deal with the question, oh, your spouse or your father or your mother has to move into a facility, particularly when it's dementia related. This scenario talks about moving people from Forest and Sarnia into Lambton, into Meadowview. Has there been any discussion about the emotional questions that presents? Not obviously for the patient necessarily, although the patient would be concerning based upon their reaction to the move, but also for the family. The families really pull and tug, because generally speaking, you're talking about older adults, and that implies that, and I'll use Sarnia as an example, for a husband or a wife to visit their spouse would then require traveling from Sarnia to Petrolia to do that. And in many cases, that happens daily. So winter travel, all of those issues become a concern. So I guess in terms of bringing the idea forward, we would hopefully include the families in that discussion and talk about the implications of travel relative to seeing your loved one.
Absolutely. Our work towards this dementia house started with our difficulties in supporting people who are having trouble living in the traditional long-term care home. So people who are having behavioral expressions. And so there would be a lot of work with the family already happening before we even suggested moving that person. And probably work from the multidisciplinary team, including social work, to make sure that this move would be the best thing for the person and for the family. And one of the underlying themes in emotional focused care and the new models of care for dementia is a partnership with the family. So having the family as part of the care team in a more in a deeper way than it is in a traditional long-term care home. So there would be lots of work happening. And what we've heard from our colleagues who have implemented the butterfly model is often that people are coming and asking, when can my family member move to that? So, you know, we're looking at starting with a small scale, but I think you're right. I think it is the future, and how we get there efficiently and effectively is what our planning has been looking at.
I can't thank you enough for moving in this direction, and I hope, fervently hope, that Lambton County can be a leader in this. Thank you very much.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you. And I want to echo Councillor Stark's comments. I hit on the report also, and I think it's a great opportunity now to look at something to move forward with. Dementia is becoming a bigger part of our society all the time. And I'm just surprised that the provincial government hasn't recognized that and looked for opportunities to provide funding to move it forward. And whether there's an opportunity for us to go and approach them on a more maybe aggressive basis to get some funding for something like this. And especially right now with the interest rates is working in such a great favor, an opportunity to build would be a great time to get this up and going in rather than strike while the iron's hot basically, and move this opportunity forward, because I think the report is excellent, Jane. It really outlines some good opportunity there that I think we can take advantage of.
I agree with Councillor Cook. I would love to do a delegation even to Roma or Good Roads or in respect to this. I think this is fantastic. Councillor Hand.
Mrs. Joris, excellent report again. For those of you who didn't have the opportunity previously, I attended, and many of us attended, a full-day workshop that was held at Forest a couple years ago. Jane, would it be?
2 years in June, yeah.
We were able to see some films of different models, including the butterfly model. And some of the places, I think most of them were, well, the Netherlands and in the United States, there was some examples of things that were built. But my question relates to, I know in Petrolia, it's, there's the 10 units that have been emptied or available because the doctor is no longer coming. And there's property, but does that exist at, at the property situation, does it exist at the other two homes? Like, you may only have this opportunity in Petrolia. I'm not sure.
So it certainly is not the case in adjacent to the home we have in Sarnia. There's not enough property there. We don't know what's going to happen in Forest. We're next door to a school, which there is some work being done in Lambton Shores for the super school, so that property may be available, and may or may not be something that we would like to look at. So there are some opportunities. The dementia house doesn't need to specifically be on the property of the existing long-term care home, though. It could be a separate, totally separate. And in some communities, particularly in Norway and Sweden, you would drive by a long-term care home in a community and wouldn't even know that's what it was. So there is that opportunity. It's just that in Petrolia, we have the land, we have an older home, and that's been the place where we've really started new things with dementia care. So that's why we're looking at, and that space became empty. So that's why we've started there.
Ms. Joris, with this model, does it allow for families to stay? I know in our long-term care home in Watford, we've had wives of people who they just can't take care of them anymore, but they want to stay close with them. Can they have like two people in one room?
This model that we're looking at has one person in one room, a private room, which seems to help people who are experiencing behavioral expressions of the disease process. So we don't have that available right now, and that's not included in this proposal.
I'm just thinking in terms of like my own marriage, like if something happened to my husband, could I move in with him and help with his care kind of thing?
We do in all of the traditional long-term care homes have something called spousal reunification, where the spouse can go on the wait list and move in even if they don't meet the criteria for long-term care. So there is that ability, and we have some people who have moved in when their spouse moved in. It's not really part of this model though.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments about this? Seeing none, we will take the vote on receiving and filing those reports. All in favor? That is carried. And please keep that in mind for maybe Roma or Good Roads. I think this is a fantastic presentation to bring to the province. So we will, is there any other business for long-term care? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Corporate Services Division. We have an information report there about the AM and PM rotations. We need a mover and a seconder to receive and file that report. Moved by Councillor Cook, seconded by Deputy Warden Marriott. Any questions or comments about that? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. And we have a report requiring a motion. We need a mover and a seconder to have that report put on the floor. Moved by Councillor Hand, seconded by Warden Weber. Thank you. Any questions or comments about that report? Warden Weber.
Just a comment from the AM committee. They added a section in there for the that the deputy warden candidates would be allowed to speak for up to 2 minutes. That was not part of the original report, but AM committee thought it prudent to let the deputy warden candidates speak.
Okay, so would you like to add that as an amendment to the?
I would add that as an amendment to coincide with what the AM committee did.
Thank you. And is the seconder good with that amendment? Who seconded it? I can't remember.
I think I seconded it. I think
Okay.
Mayor Hand moved it.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And so you're good with that, Councillor Hand? Yeah, okay. And Councillor Loosely, did you have a question or comment?
No, I was just going to clarify what you just did. Thanks.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments, additions to that?
If I
Seeing
may,
none?
Chair, just
Yes.
enough. When we wrote this, we wrote it in the context that the rules for the election of the warden and deputy warden are to have a confidential vote. Hence the sort of the move to the fairgrounds. We've since developed an opportunity on Zoom to have a confidential voting process on Zoom. And so should public health matters sort of deteriorate to the point where this thing needs to move back to a Zoom, or if you wish to go to Zoom in the first instance, we can host a confidential election through the Zoom software. I just wanted the committee to know that. I advised Committee AM of the same this morning.
Okay, that's great. So we do have options depending on which direction this thing goes, so. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Stark, did you have a question? You're on mute.
I wondered if we could entertain a public vote.
I believe that's up to council and I don't know. I think.
No, that's a correct response. At this point in time, no. I think it was made in jest, a bit of a comment, but no, at this point in time, your rules and your governance does not allow for the public to vote directly for the warden.
I wasn't referring to the public, I was referring to the members of council.
So it would be an open vote, is what you're saying.
Right, just like democracy. Anyway, it's irrelevant to the point. What happens, happens.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Were you making a motion there or to add that, Councillor Stark? Is
No.
that what you?
No.
Okay, okay, just to clarify.
It was a point of levity.
Okay, thank you.
Just- I was, just a comment regarding that. I was part of Huron County Council when the vote was read out loud and you stood up and said who you were voting for publicly. Very interesting times.
I was gonna say, that wouldn't be awkward at all, would it? All right, any other questions or comments on this report? Then all in favor? That is carried, thank you. Is there any other business for Corporate Services Division? Seeing none, we'll move on to Finance, Facilities, and Court Services Division. We have one information report. We need a mover and a seconder for that report. Moved by Councillor Broad, seconded by Councillor Boucher. Any questions or comments on that report? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving and filing that. That is carried, thank you. And there is a report requiring a motion. How does council want to deal with that? Or how does the committee want to deal with that?
I would move that recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Warden Weber. Yeah, Councillor Cook, are you seconding that? Great. Any questions or comments, or Larry, would you like to speak to that at all?
Just a quick summary for the county council that the county budget, we still remain in a balanced position. We've done we've taken a lot of credits to the immediate action steps that we've taken early on in the process, where we had a cost containment strategy in place right from the outset. We continue to get the government grants and subsidies to cover off all our essential service costs. And this motion is just to, this recommendation is just to seek further funding should things get a little crazy in wave 2.
Councillor Stark.
Yes, Mr. Pelaric, you're right. This county council took a lot of heat at the beginning of COVID-19 in terms of cost controls. I would suggest, and I will make a motion, that this report, or the gist of this report, be publicly advertised to show how dramatically, what impactful your and this county council's efforts have been to contain costs. I make that as a motion.
I believe we have to deal with the motion forward, and we can maybe deal with that, your motion in other business, if that's all right with you, Councillor Stark?
Well, it will be relative to this, so it can follow immediately after.
Yes, that's fine. Councillor Cook, did you have a comment?
Just a question through to Larry. I noticed that we're having lots of road work being done in our area now. How did our tenders come in? Did we make a pretty good on our tender contracts for pricing for our road work this year?
If Jason Cole's on the Zoom, I refer the question over to him. But as far as we know, we're on balance. We have a balanced budget in that area. But any more detailed questions, I move over to Jason.
Through you, Madam Chair. Sure, I'd be happy to answer that question. We at the beginning of the year, we saw some very good prices come in, and then actually we had I would call a competitive or normal pricing shortly after. But in our projects later in the year, we've seen a return to some excellent pricing, which will allow us to complete some extra kilometers and do additional work if that money is carried over. I think in part that has to do with the flexibility that we allowed in our some of our tendering to allow the work to either proceed in 2020 or in early 2021. So we gave the contractors the option to initiate that work early. So yes, we're quite pleased with the tendering results this year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So we will vote on that motion then. All in favor? That is carried. And Councillor Stark, you would like to make a motion that we do a press release in regards to that? Or what were your thoughts? You're on mute.
Yes, my motion is to publicly disclose in detail page 57 and page 58 of the report, which identifies in Appendix A, COVID-19 key cost containment initiatives, and in Appendix B, COVID-19 capital budget. I would like that publicly disclosed in a separate media release. And that's what.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder to that motion?
I'll second that.
All right, seconded by Warden Weaver. Any questions or comments about that?
Just, I'll speak to that, and this has to do with our staff and what a job they have done, how they have adjusted, and how they have brought things together and analyzed everything and kept the county going and kept all of the operations working the best they can. So we did this because of the team that we have at the county working together, and the kudos goes to them, and we're pleased that we're in this position. And going forward, I think it does need to be made public that we're working for you, the citizens of Lambton County, all across the county. So I support this.
Okay, Councillor Hand.
So if this passes and goes forward to have a communication more broadly, you would have the opportunity, Warden Weaver, to put in a paragraph similar to what you just said, to give that the credibility and the accolades to the staff. So that would be part of the report, correct?
Councillor Stark.
As a matter of fact, I would hope that the warden would be the author of that press release, and subject to the fact that the press would follow up with him for further details. So yeah, this is exactly the direction that I'm going.
Great. Warden Weaver and then Councillor Bouchy.
Certainly agree with that, and I haven't been on the radio lately with Sue Storr and doing updates, but I would certainly promote that this position if I had that opportunity again. So we'll try to put that out there as well.
Okay, Councillor Bouchy, you are muted, just so you're aware. You're still muted. I'm going to ask that you hit the space bar or unmute yourself.
There you go.
Okay, now.
Yeah.
And that's a brand new computer, so I don't know. We paid a lot of money for it. But at any rate, I know the warden has sometimes even a quarter of the page in the newspapers all over. He could include that in his statements without any additional money. Additional cost.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you for bringing that to light, Councillor Stark. I think that's a good idea. So is there any other business to do with Finance, Facilities, and Court Services Division? Seeing none, we'll go on to Social Services Division. There are two information reports there. How does council want to, do we have a motion to receive and file those reports? Moved by Councillor Stark, seconded by Councillor Cook. Any questions or comments on those reports? Ms. Calisante, is there anything you wanted to highlight?
I guess the only thing I'd want to highlight this morning is the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit Program came at a really good time during COVID for us. Although that was a very busy time, it allowed us to give some of those benefits to those individuals experiencing homelessness. So we use 10 of the portable housing benefits to house individuals. Now, we do need some additional support services for those individuals to remain housed. And presently, we're using our partners like CMHA, but we will be looking for some supports moving forward. But at least we've been able to use those to, one, reduce our wait list, and two, place some homeless individuals into permanent housing. So it was a really timely program, and we're hoping to get additional dollars from the federal government in the future for another program like this.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on those reports? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving and filing? That is carried. Thank you very much. Any other business for Social Services Division? No, so we have no in-camera sessions today, so I am just looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Hand, seconded by Councillor Broad. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. That was a great, efficient meeting, everyone.